Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Ask Sarah Anything April edition. And today we have our Equine Division Director, Sarah Griffiths, answering all your questions about your beloved equines. But before we start, I want to remind you all about some housekeeping items. So please switch your chat to everyone so that we can all join in on the conversation. And if you have any questions, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we will do our best to get through all of them. So don't be shy and ask Sarah anything. And since people are still setting in, I would like to start our webinar with 2 questions, if it's okay. So spring, as you know, it's upon us. The weather is finally getting warmer. And what would be, Sarah, your top 3 tips for spring to help transition the seasons? And since you are talking about spring, how do you naturally address hives during this season?
Yeah, hi everybody. Nice to see you. I see we have a few people still joining, so thank you so much for joining us. And very excited to have Mariana on with me. We missed Steph, but I'm very excited to work with Mariana.
Thank you.
So yeah, so basically every second month we're going to do a Q&A for everybody on equine specific questions. So yeah, we'll be here to do that, and then you can always ask those questions in the other sessions as well. Those every second month we'll do the Q&As, and every second month we will do like a presentation of some sort on a subject that we get a lot of questions about. So if you have any questions, we love to hear your questions so that we know what future presentations we can do for you as well.
Yeah,
so
it's very helpful.
Yeah, so as far as spring goes, it's April. It was just my birthday actually, so it's always a nice time of year. I love the growth of all the plants outside and starting my garden and all of that stuff. And with the horses, they obviously like the sunshine just as much as we do. They like to, you know, eventually get out onto the grass. The grass is starting to grow, which can in some ways be an issue if you're familiar with transitioning your horses from you know, gravel paddock area in this winter time where it's a little bit safer footing for them into the grass in the springtime. That's one of a question that we get a lot, is how to do that safely, because in springtime laminitis is kind of one of those things that people worry about, especially with ponies and older horses as well. So it's always a good idea to make sure, and this is something I've been doing a ton of research on lately. Basically, like the biggest worry for people transitioning horses to the springtime grass is the springtime grass is so rich. It's high in sugar during the daytime hours and during the sunlight. So the grass is highest in sugar when the sun is on it and it gets warmer. So nighttime grazing for horses with have had a history of laminitis or insulin resistance and ponies is often recommended, especially when the grass is so rich in the spring. So that's one really good tip to have. The other one is if you can start by hand grazing for even 15 minutes in a halter, and just having your horses out on the grass for a short amount of time just to get their gut microbiome used to that switch over, because a lot of horses are eating primarily hay in the winter, especially here in Canada and lots of parts of the States, because the grass is not really growing in the winter time. So yeah, so just making sure that you're very gradually putting them onto onto that grass in a very slow and gradual fashion. So 15 minutes for like 1 week every day, and then maybe going up to 25 minutes, and then on and on until you've gotten up to, I usually go up to like an hour and a half to 2 hours, and then I'll let them, start to go out on the actual grass. We do mow all of our lawns before the horses go out as well. So it cuts down a lot of that sugar in the top and the tips of the grass. So if you can cut the grass before you let the horses go out on it, that always helps as well. The other nice thing is that around on the West Coast here, probably on the East Coast as well, we have a lot of dandelion growth, and dandelions are actually, I would say at this time of year, it's something that they will primarily eat even over the grass. So if you have areas where you can switch them into where they can continuously eat dandelion, that's a really, it's a like free way to help your horse's circadian rhythm shift in a very healthy way. So it supports their kidney function, their liver function. It gives them a whole bunch of micro minerals and vitamins that are going to help them to shed out their coat properly, deal with that metabolic change that's happening. If your horse doesn't have access to them naturally, you can always add that leaf and flower like in a dried form for your horses. The other thing that you can do is add our liver tonic, which is a 4-way herb that includes dandelion root. It also has greater celandine, barberry, and milk thistle in it. So it has a very cleansing effect and helps because the metabolism kind of wakes up in the springtime. So all the mares start going into season, and all the geldings and stallions start to notice that, and everybody starts to get on kind of a different wavelength. Everybody's shedding out their coats. There's probably a lot more foot growth on your horses at that time. So those are all things that you can do as long as everything that you do is really gradual, you're going to have a much better result. And then as far as hives go, if horses are prone to getting hives, my top tips for that would be definitely to get them onto the liver tonic, because that can really, really help to reduce the risk of having a really big bright outbreak of hives in the spring. Even if they do have them, oftentimes it will be a much less of a reaction when they're on the liver tonic. There are some homeopathic remedies that you probably want to have on hand in case that happens. So I always use like high potency arnica, high potency aconite. Apis is a wonderful remedy for hives. And then Urtica urens, which is stinging nettle. You can get that as a homeopathic remedy as well, which is also highly indicated for hives in the spring. And calendula is another homeopathic that can be really useful. You can also use those in a combination, so you can make it up into a liquid with all of those remedies included, and that you can give on a repetitive basis for several days, because often hives, once they come out, it takes them several days to kind of come down. There's another remedy that is also really amazing for any kind of allergy flare-ups that happen in the springtime, called histamine, which is made from histamine. So hives, asthma symptoms, any kind of like allergic inflammation, there's often a lot of histamine involved, and homeopathic histamine is another one that can really help to bring down those symptoms as well. So those are all of my tips for that question.
Amazing. We have other 2 questions here in the Q&A, and Hi, Sarah. Can you please explain what is a species-specific probiotic? And then I will ask the other question after this, after you answer this one.
Sure. Yeah. So people get really, like, Julie's been talking about species-specific probiotics for a long time with the pets, and it is a difficult thing to describe. So a lot of probiotics that you see on the market today for people, for dogs, for horses, for cats, are actually originally derived from bovines, so from cows. So a lot of those lactobacillus bacteria, which are very beneficial, they're derived from cows. So if humans are taking them, they can have benefits, but they aren't specific to humans or to horses. So a species-specific probiotic is a bacteria that is found in the, usually they'll explore, the scientists or microbiologists will explore the manure of the horse, for an example, and they will identify strains that don't exist in other species. So the ones that we use in our equine probiotics, we do include some of those bovine strains, but we also have one specifically that is called Lactobacillus equi, which is only found in the digestive tract of the horse, and it's been specifically studied to be an actual probiotic. So that means it's a healthy strain. It's not a pathogenic strain. So it has health benefits and exists in the horse's gut to enhance digestion, increase the abilities of the immune system to modulate itself. It produces certain enzymes, it produces certain short-chain fatty acids, and some of these bacteria also help us to, or help horses to metabolize and absorb specific nutrients. So when horses are kept in our sort of more modern way that we keep them, they don't have as much access to microbes in a healthy way from dirt, from trees, from just natural, being out in the flora. So, and what they do is they take this strain from healthy horse manure and they propagate it, and then they do a bunch of testing with it to make sure that it meets all of the standards. So this one is genetically proven to only exist in the equine gut. It doesn't exist in people or dogs or any other kind of livestock. It's equine specific. And we do have strains in the phytosflora that are canine specific. We just released the wolf one as well, which is a specifically wolf strains of probiotics. And then we also have our Felix flora, which has the feline, like cat specific probiotics. And so they do the same thing with each of these. They have to go through some pretty rigorous testing. And they have to be identified as only living in that species and having beneficial effects for the animal. They also are tested to make sure that they don't produce antibiotic resistance, and that they're actually, not contributing to any environmental issues in that way. So, but yeah, that's the difference between a species-specific probiotic and just a probiotic, is that most of the probiotics that everybody knows are derived from cows. and species specific is starting to become, it's a pretty wide range of scientific study now in microbiology, and it has a lot of merit to it because certain strains have evolved with that species for like God only knows how many thousands of years, maybe even millions of years, and so they're genetically linked with the genetics of that animal. And so on an epigenetic level, it has a lot of implications. If they're missing those strains, it could actually be one of the keys to solving some of the mysteries of these diseases that horses are getting in modern times. So hopefully that answers that question.
100% for sure. Another question that we have here is, what are some diet tips you have for horses with laminitis? I don't know if I'm saying it right, and Cushing's or insulin resistance.
Yeah, so diet is a tricky one. So this kind of feeds into what I was saying earlier with the with eating like the spring grasses where there's a lot of sugar. So sugar is a big problem for horses with insulin resistance, with Cushing's, and any horse that has a history of laminitis or has had a recent episode of laminitis. You really are trying to lower the amount of sugar that the horse is consuming. But one of the things that is also really important to do with horses diet-wise when they are very sugar sensitive is to look at foods that will work as a glucose regulator, like nutrients that will work as a sugar regulator and help with keeping insulin and sugar on a more even keel rather than having like a big sugar boost and then a sugar crash. So this is the same kind of idea that you would have if you were a diabetic. You would be trying to limit the amount of sugar, but you also want to eat foods that are glucose regulators. So for horses, that the main thing that is a glucose regulator for them through their diet is fiber. And because they're hindgut fermenters, they have the ability to break down pretty undigestible fibers in terms of what humans can digest. And if you were to think about how horses forage, if they're out somewhere where they can do that, they would be eating bark and wood and dirt and leaves and not just grass, right? So grass is just one part of their diet. It's a large part of their diet, but also the stage at which the grass is being eaten at, as it matures, it becomes much more fibrous. So horses aren't always eating grass that's really high in sugar. Plus, any fiber that they consume actually helps them to regulate and balance out any sugar that they do consume. So it's the same thing. If we don't get enough sugar, our insulin can be off and we can develop like type 2 diabetes. And one of the most important things with type 2 diabetes, which is usually mostly controlled with diet, is to make sure you're getting a lot of fiber, and fiber from not just one source, but like multiple different sources. So it works as a prebiotic. It helps to balance your microbiome so that your because your microbiome is also involved in glucose regulation and insulin output and the metabolic system. And that goes the same for horses. So it actually comes down to ensuring that their gut is really, really healthy, that they've got a really diverse microbiome, There are microbiome tests that you can do for horses to find out not just what kind of pathogenic bacteria exist, but also like what is the layout of their microbiome at this time. So if they're having insulin resistance issues or laminitic issues, you can do microbiome testing and sometimes do a lot of good work just by re-stabilizing their gut. And also there's certain things in the diet that should be avoided, basically for all horses, but really very much so with any horse with a metabolic issue. One of those things is glyphosate, and we do have an article on our blog about glyphosate as like a hidden ingredient in a lot of equine processed feeds. So glyphosate is an herbicide that's also known as Roundup. I talk about it all the time. And it's also known to be a metabolic dysregulator and carcinogenic and a whole bunch of other not so nice things. It's also not listed on your ingredients, on your label of any of your bagged foods that you feed. So you actually have to understand how the agricultural industry works and what crops are sprayed with what. So most of the crops that are heavily used in bovine feed, equine feed, cows, sheep, pigs, they're all sprayed heavily with this herbicide. And that in combination with a low fiber diet, in combination with a lot of sugar, is going to set your horse up for a bit of a dumpster fire, so that it predisposes them to all those conditions. So even if you have a young horse, you can start thinking about all these things and eliminating glyphosate from their diet so that you can help them to, prevent that scenario from ever even happening. But if you have a horse that has already had that happen, I always recommend doing a really big overhaul on their diet, and especially eliminating highly processed like horse feed, increasing the fiber, along with probably adding some nutritive herbs. There are also a lot of micro minerals that are missing from a lot of horses' diets that can also exacerbate insulin resistance. So we do have an article as well on the top 6 nutrient deficiencies in horses. And that's another really good one to take a look at on our blog. And I think Mariana has posted the glyphosate blog in our chat there. And I think you can probably find the other one as well.
Michelle is helping me today. Yeah, it's awesome. There.
Great. Yeah,
so find the other one too.
Those are it's kind of a good concept to think of, because it's the same for humans. But for horses, I think it's actually even almost like, because they're so sugar sensitive, when they don't have enough fiber in their diet, it is a really big problem in terms of equine diets, that people are balancing their diets with extruded feeds. But those extruded feeds also have all of these other kind of side effects that we don't want. They do have some benefits because they're very convenient, and they also have like some of those harder to get minerals in them, but they also come with this heavy herbicide load. And also a lot of times they have, because they're so highly processed, they can also contain a lot of starch, which turns it right into sugar. So those are all really, really important things to think about for any horse, but especially horses with laminitis and insulin resistance.
Nice, thank you, Sarah. We have some other super interesting questions, and people are curious about to have more information about the species specific. So
Sure.
Lorraine is asking, how does a species specific probiotic actually come about in their species, like food, environment, whatever? And she's adding that, does each species create their own specific probiotic if the gut is compromised? Like if they have like a leaky gut or something, do they lack that specific strength?
So yeah, so it's a little bit like, so your gut microbiome and your horse's gut microbiome, you kind of want to think of it as if it was an ecosystem. So if you think about like outside, if you go into the forest, there's an ecosystem. There's weeds, there's tiny plants like this, there's mosses, there's mushrooms, there's trees, there's grass, there's all these different, there's frogs, there's squirrels, there's deer, there's, you know, whatever's in that forest. And all of those organisms are contributing to that ecosystem. So when, say, it's very easy to think of like, say you have like part of the forest, somebody comes in to cut down all the trees and take the wood and bulldozes down the trees, cuts them all down, ruins all of the ground cover, all the trees are gone, the animals leave. So this is kind of what happens in terms of like leaky gut. So like the construction crew or the tree cutting crew would kind of be like bad food, stress, all of that kind of stuff that would exacerbate like a leaky gut type of scenario. So when you're thinking of leaky gut, there's a lot less diversity, a lot less. So what defines a healthy microbiome, which is something that's been studied in a lot of different species, including humans, is that the more diverse organism's microbiome is, so that means the more different types of strains, different families and groups, and then many different strains within that family. And so there's like sometimes like thousands of different species living in one gut. And that input comes from the food that you eat, especially if it's from the environment. Horses would naturally get microbes from the dirt, from any kind of plant matter that they eat. We get microbes from the air that we breathe in. Also, even fungi are a part of our microbiome. So that's a whole other ballpark and whole other rabbit hole. But fungus and bacteria and even viruses and all of these things can actually live inside our bodies. And that's our own specific ecosystem. And depending on what part of the world we live in, what kind of food we're eating, what kind of stress we're under, how much we go out into nature. Are we going to the beach? Are we going to the mountains? Are we going to the forest? Do we travel on planes a lot and go to other countries? And like, so it's like almost like as you live your life and you go into different environments, you're actually diversifying further and further and further and further. So then you have more and more strains that become a part of your microbiome. And then inside your body, depending on how much, like your mental well-being, your physical well-being, your diet, your lifestyle, how much you move, all of these things, that's going to determine what species of microbes is going to inhabit your gut and be healthy and happy in there. So if like there are some labs now, there's I think one in Canada and a few in the States and some in Europe that show that they have kind of a ballpark idea of what a healthy microbiome looks like in a horse, in a dog, in a person. So when you so you send in your horse's manure to these special labs that do microbiome work, and they'll take that profile and they'll test, I think they test up to like 100 different DNA strains of microbes that are usually the most common families that you'll find that you want to see in a healthy gut. And then they'll compare that to kind of what they know to be a healthy microbiome in a healthy animal. And then depending on how different that is from, like sometimes we see, like I've used animal biome a lot for dogs and cats. And sometimes you'll see that some of these strains that are supposed to be there are actually even at like a 0. And so they're actually missing. And a lot of times that happens through repeated antibiotic use. That's a really big problem. There are some other medications that can kind of wipe out certain strains. And then once they're gone, they can't actually they can't populate. So you actually have to re-inoculate that animal with that bacteria. But your bacteria actually even has like a 24-hour circadian rhythm. So it actually changes depending on it can change within an hour of you having like a really, really big stress event where you have a huge cortisol spike or an adrenaline spike. It can actually change your microbiome status within a very short time. So that's all really important to understand, that your microbiome isn't a static thing. It's a ever-changing environmental feedback source for your body. So it's almost like, part of the environment is coming into you and actually giving you feedback from the outside world. So you have that in your nasal passageways, in your mouth, in your gut, in your bowel, and pretty much everywhere in your entire body. So, and then when, if you understand like basic biology as far as like symbiotic relationships, that's how certain bacterial strains evolve with specific species, because it's not only beneficial for the horse to have this strain living in it, but it's also somehow beneficial for that strain to be partnering up with that animal for whatever reason that is. Maybe it's because that animal has a diet that helps that bacteria thrive, plain and simple. So there's a lot of these symbiotic, that's what your microbiome is. It's a bunch of little single-celled species that are having a symbiotic relationship with you. So it's an ever-changing, ever-evolving thing. But if you can remember that you want to honor those little microbes, and if you can avoid using antibiotics, there's lots of information out there that's showing that can really, for many, even sometimes many years, irreversibly change your microbiome status. And in the field of epigenetics, which is how your environment is actually more of an influence on your health than your actual own DNA. And your DNA can be turned on and off in situations based on your environmental input. So it's really, really important to always remember that the more diverse your microbiome is, that means the more intelligent your immune system is. And that means the more resources your own body or your horse's body has to understand and in a healthy way respond to incoming environmental threats or whatever it is. So I hope that answers your questions. I think it does.
Yeah, no, answer, and you'll go further, like explaining.
Yeah, it's a very big topic. So I think that's as simple as I can make it.
Marcia Lawrence sent us two questions that they are not exactly, I don't know, related, but since it's from just one person, I would ask both of them. How often should healthy horses get your probiotics? And can you recommend an alternative to chemical wormer?
Oh yeah, of course. Okay, so that's a good point too. Yeah, dewormers, when they're overused, can also affect the microbiome. So so the first question for healthy horses, it depends on how your horse is living and being housed. That's kind of how I try to determine when to use probiotics and when to give breaks, because it's good to take breaks from probiotics too. So what I do with them is I always want to try and be as diverse with microbes as I can be. So even with probiotics, the reason we have 15 strains in our probiotic is because we want it to be as diverse as possible. So a lot of the probiotics that you'll see on the market have like between 2 and 5 strains, and we wanted to make more diversity so that the strains can actually communicate with each other and establish in relation to each other, if that makes sense. So the more strains you have, the healthier that process will be when they actually go into your body. So so there's that aspect of it. And then the other aspect is that horses would naturally be getting their microbes from nature. So they would be eating grass and pulling up the roots and eating some of the dirt, and there's microbes in the dirt, there's microbes on the bush, there's microbes in whatever, they're all over. So when we house horses on gravel, in wooden boxes and wooden or metal fences with no access to the dirt or to any forage other than like cured hay, it really reduces the amount of daily microbial input that they're getting. And so in BC, where I live, it's very, very wet here and very, very slippery here in the winter, which is in a lot of places in North America. So in the wintertime, we have them in a more unnatural setting to make sure that they're not like hurting themselves, especially with these really high performance horses that have a lot of energy and they can really get going when they're out in the field setting, like, hi horse. So we put them in a better footing so that we know they're not going to be hurting themselves that way. But then at those times of year, I always make sure that he's getting probiotics every single day. And then once he starts to go out onto the grass, I keep him on the probiotics as he's going onto grass, as I'm kind of transitioning him on to it. And then once he's on the grass, like here we have a beautiful 10-acre property, and the back of our property, there's like a 60-acre forest, like an old growth forest. So the runoff from that is all coming into our fields. So it's a very healthy system. So I know that in the summer when he has that field and he has that dirt and those plants to eat, he's getting his own microbial input. And so I actually back off of the probiotics, and then I just allow him to inoculate himself naturally. And then as this fall comes and starts to rain more and we're not having them out on the pasture as much, then I start to incorporate the probiotics back in. So that, and my horse is pretty healthy. So that's how I do it with, that's how I recommend to do it with most healthy horses. If your horse has an existing health condition, there's certain conditions that they may need to be on probiotics and gut supportive herbs and things like that for longer periods of time. And the Gut Soothe is great because it also has like herbs and nutraceuticals and prebiotics that will help to reestablish the gut if it has your horse has leaky gut, or they've had to be on some kind of NSAID, or they have a history of ulcers or a history of colic. I do have a couple of case studies to share. I haven't been able to meet up with the owner yet, but I have a really great case study of a horse that has been on the Gut Soothe for about a year now and had periods of time where she has come off of it. And she was a chronic colicker before she went on it. And if she comes off it, like if the owner runs out and she comes off of it, she immediately starts to colic within like 2 or 3 weeks. So if you have a horse like that, where it's working for them and it's keeping them safe from having that happen, then you can safely use it all the time. For horses with insulin resistance, metabolic disease, any kind of immune mediated illness, inflammation, autoimmune diseases, things like that, I would say they could be on it all the time. But for healthy horses, you can rotate them on and off, and I would do it in relation to the environment in which you're keeping them in. So if they're never on grass and they're never getting access to dirt and stuff, I would say those horses could also have it all the time. And then for dewormers,
Yes, that's what I would
yeah,
like to
there's
remember.
a few really good ones. There's a great one from a company in the States called Silver Linings. It's an herb company, and I think they are equine specific. I think they have pet stuff too, but they have a great herbal dewormer that I have used before. I also do, instead of deworming, like I only use dewormers if I do a fecal test and it comes back with like a high load of either parasite or eggs. Or they have actual symptoms of like parasite overload, which would be like, a big round belly, hard to keep weight on, diarrhea, discomfort. Sometimes they can colic, and be very uncomfortable. So if you have those symptoms along with a fecal test that shows that there's something up, I sometimes will use 1 round of dewormer, because sometimes they need it to really get themselves, if they have a really bad infestation, that's what those medications are for. But then to maintain them after that, you could most likely just use the herbs instead. And then I usually do those twice a year. So in the fall and in the spring. And you can do one in the middle of the summer too, if you want to, if you're in an area where there's tons of flies and stuff like that.
Thank you. So there's another question here. It's not probiotic related, I guess, but it's how do you know if your horse's hoof is in healthy condition, and what are some tips to care for an infected hoof naturally? How to take care of it.
Question. So again, I hate to repeat myself, but the hoof is connected to the gut. So there's a lot of, if you look up online, you'll see a lot of articles and a lot of websites that have like this gut hoof connection. This is kind of a thing that's like the brain gut connection. It seems like everything is really connected to the gut. So when it comes to feet, there's a lot of things you can tell by looking at the quality of the growth of the foot, the shape, the integrity, like how either hard or soft it is, if it's cracking, if it's got rings in it, like growth rings, if it's really flat and pancakey. There's all those types of scenarios, and those would sometimes indicate nutritional deficiencies. So you always want to make sure that you're if you have especially cracks in the hoof wall, either lateral or otherwise, you would definitely want to make sure that they're not selenium deficient, not zinc deficient. Biotin is also a really great nutrient for horses with that problem. I often, if they do have some kind of weird growth stuff going on, I would definitely consider doing a blood panel on them to test their microminerals and their macrominerals. There's a test that they can send into the lab to show you if they have any sort of deficiencies there. A lot of horses are dealing with mineral deficiencies, which can cause a lot of different growth problems. Growth rings and ridges and bumps can sometimes indicate that there has been a mild laminitic episode going on. So that would be a whole process to make sure that you're covering all your bases there. So gut, again, making sure that their diet is really clean, lots of fiber. They also do need some a proper amount of amino acids, proper amount of protein, and then some fat too for certain horses that either if they're in heavy work or if they're hard keepers and they get really skinny really easily. A lot of times if that's happening, there's also absorption issues, which can come from having something going on with their gut. So feet are a great indicator. It's just like when our hair isn't good, right? Like if our hair, because it's made from the same proteins out of keratin. So if you are seeing also poor hair growth, poor hair coat, skin diseases like fungal infections, things like that. When they have a hard time shedding out their coat or growing in a coat for winter, along with hoof problems, that's often has something to do with nutritional and or metabolic issues. So those are all really, really important to take note of, especially if your horse has always had good feet and then all of a sudden doesn't. Even stress can be a big problem and change the integrity of the hoof. Definitely making sure you're covering all your minerals. Minerals also come in many forms, so always trying to pick the most organic and natural forms of those minerals. I do have some information on that in the nutritional deficiency blog, which I think Mariana and Michelle have posted in the chat there. So it has some recommendations for what forms those vitamins and minerals should be in to actually be absorbed and not be in a form that's actually detrimental to your horse's health. A lot of the oxide forms can actually cause oxidation in your horse's body, which is not what you want. Can cause a lot more inflammation and a lot of other problems. So generally, you want to go with the organic forms instead of the industrialized forms to make sure that you're covering your bases there and not causing more problems. Yeah, and like I said, biotin is a great one for healthy hooves. And then really getting rid of glyphosate will do wonders for them. I have a video that, I don't know if I have it handy, but there's a doctor out of the, I think he went to he's a professor at Stanford, and he also works for the California Environmental Protection Agency. And he is a scientist that studies glyphosate in particular. And he did specifically a study on horses, and he tested the glyphosate that was in the horse feed, and then tested it in the tissues of the horses, like in their urine, in their hair, in their hoof, like in their hoof trimmings. And he could follow the glyphosate from the food into all of these tissues. And he particularly says in the video that horses that are having like disintegration of their hooves, like really serious problems, those horses were like completely, like almost basically poisoned with glyphosate from their food. So that's another reason to get that chemical out of your horse's diet. And that is, yeah, his name is Dr. Anthony Samsel. And the study that he did, I can try and find it, and we can maybe, if anyone's really interested, just email us. I guess you can email me, Sarah@adoredbeast.com, and I can find the study for you. I have it. I just don't have it handy with me right now.
No, I'm amazing. It was amazing, but I think like it's almost 1 hour that we're like talking right now. Yeah, so it's getting late, and I think I'm gonna to wrap up the webinar. I don't know if you want to say anything else, to talk about anything else related to the things that we discussed today.
Yeah, I think, you know, when you're thinking of what to do at this time of year, just make sure that you're going low and slow with grass. I mean, most horse people know that. But yeah, taking advantage of like giving them access to these extra nutrients that they might not be getting otherwise, because we don't really keep horses in supernatural environments a lot of the time now. So that's kind of what the Adored Beast products are for. They are meant to kind of fill in some of those gaps, and help make life easier for them in our human world. So if you're wanting to try any of the products, I believe we have our discount code, which is for 20% off. That'll be for any of the Equine products. And I do you have it there?
Equine 20. Yeah, I'm just writing here in the chat again.
Awesome. Yeah, so that one will save you 20%, which is a pretty awesome savings. And I definitely do feel like, you know, the reason we started this company was because we could see that this is, you know, there's a lot of horses struggling with these issues. And we just want to try and help make their lives easier. And then it makes our lives easier too. And, you know, we're always happy when our animals are happy. I know when my animals are sick, I'm a disaster. So, and I know Julie says the same thing. You just kind of start to lose it. And so that's kind of where Julie and I are both at with, you know, we just want them to be as well as they can for as long as they can and have the best quality of life that they can. So yeah, if you guys have other questions, we're always here. You can always email them also to questions@adoredbeast.com. And then we also have our awesome community online on Facebook called the Adored Beast
Collective.
Yes.
Yes.
That's a private, and that's a really good resource too. I do answer questions in there all the time. So if you guys come up with new questions, and you can also bring them to next month's seminar, which we'll be doing in May.
And we also have our amazing customer service team, so you can send the questions, any questions that you might have to them. So their email is questions@adorbees.com. We'll be glad to help you all. And I would like to thank everyone that joined us today. And also thank you, Sarah, for the amazing conversation that you had. Have a great night, everyone. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter in our website, adorbees.com, to get all info about Adorbees, our promos, new blog postings, and future Ask Sarah Anything sessions. And as we mentioned before, don't forget, for those who were here today, we have a special promo code, Equine20, that can be used in our website. And that's it. See you soon, guys. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Mariana, and everybody have a great night.
Have a great night, everyone. Bye.
Bye.